Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. Without me getting into any sort of an introduction, I have with me Mr. Vikram Sood, who needs very little introduction. I think his face and the name is more than enough for to tell the audience what kind of a conversation we're going to be having today. So, without further delay, sir, thank you so much for taking out the time to indulge me in a conversation about what's happening in our world and where do we see our great country going in the future.
Thank you, Adi, for having me on your show. And I really wanted to do it much earlier, but circumstances prevented that. So here I am, and we can start our discussions. I hope I will, by the end of it, not leave you more confused than before, because the situation is very, very confusing. Yeah, and there's no straight line anywhere.
I'm sure not, sir. Sir, let's begin with the factor that we've got two major wars, which are in news, and multiple others which are not in the news. There is ethnic cleansing, there is population movement in Africa. It's a time of chaos. And the last time we saw that was the Second World War.
Hmm.
How do you compare both the situations today and then?
I think I think one of the biggest differences is not just the numbers, but also that the geographical range is much wider, and we are also in an age of high technology. So all these are multiplying factors into the confusion. You mentioned two wars. I think there are three wars definitely on today: Ukraine and Gaza and Yemen.
Mhm.
If the American president or any other president thinks that by doing three wars he can, by being involved in three wars he can give him a better chance at the elections, I'm not too sure that will happen. Particularly if you consider, if you look back and see that which are the wars that the United States, with all its might, all its weaponry, all its techniques, all its intelligence, which are the wars it has won. And in my calculation, none. So, what is wrong with the whole system then? I
Hmm.
mean, Korea was a stalemate at best, and for superpower, a stalemate is a loss. Vietnam was a loss. Those that photograph epitomizes everything. You know, hanging on to the helicopter and they were fleeing away.
Yeah.
And Afghanistan, at least when the Russians left Afghanistan, they left a government in power.
Hmm.
Mullah was there. The Americans left by stealth in the night. Now, that's not what a superpower is supposed to do. It had been there for 20 years, and you're fighting the Taliban for 20 years and hand over Afghanistan to Taliban and leave. That's what happened. So there is an immense credibility factor that gets affected.
Hmm.
Not only has China become stronger, mightier, which ironically the West helped it become so. And now they fear that there is another challenger possibly on the scene, and that is us. India is a challenger not to their supremacy, no, it's a challenger in the economic and technological world. We're still low down the technology list compared to the Chinese or the Americans, or the Germans, anybody else, but we have the potential, we have the youth potential. And imagine two big economic superpowers in Asia plus Japan.
Hmm.
What does it mean for the West? It doesn't bring good news. It means that they are now competitors for markets, resources, money, energy. So you hear a lot of talk now, increasingly. I've been hearing it. The first one, I think, was in 1974, when a commission led by Kissinger was established to see how population could be controlled. And nowadays we hear figures of that 1 to 2 billion is adequate. We can't support, the world can't, this globe cannot support more. So what does that mean? And then you hear all sorts of rumors, stories about new pandemics, which is X time bigger than the first one. Then you hear stories that um, the EU will allow 400,000 or I don't remember the figure, immigrants next year.
Yep.
They have a problem already, and they want to increase that problem. I don't understand what that game is. So we're in a situation of high flux, and the Gaza thing is not going to be over soon. It'll linger because um, the unless the Israelis are able to essentially and completely decimate Hamas, how are you going to kill the spirit of Hamas? There's Hezbollah, there's Iran, which is backing them. And now all three, Lebanon has Hezbollah, Gaza has Hamas, Yemen has Houthis, all backed by Iran. So is the war getting enlarged there? Is it, these are questions I still have no answer, therefore I'm just talking about because I fear that that's how it is going to be. How are you going to control the sea lanes for energy? Who is going to do it? And this will have a rippling effect in all economies.
Mm.
What if, just what if, there is a fourth war, the North Koreans decide to get funny? The Americans say they get, they talk about Taiwan, but what about North Korea? They say that it is one of the axis of evil. Well, if it wakes up and does something, then what are you going to do about it? So, my friend, I have no answers at the moment, but I do have worries. And you ask me where we stand. I think, as far as our economics and infrastructure and social order, I think we've never done it better than now. We never had it better than now. And if we continue on this path, imagine being the highest growing economy in the world today, rate of growth. It's not going to overtake China. It's not going to overtake USA. That should not be their worry. But they have adopted themselves to a new worry because I think superpowers need an enemy or a problem all the time to solve or to create one and then solve it. So they're looking for some global legitimacy, as it were. That should be there all the time. If they don't have that, then how do they go around interfere? Why do you need 800 odd bases all over the world? There are more American. There were. Maybe I'm wrong now. More American troops abroad than in America.
Mhm.
It's the USA which has divided the globe into commands. We haven't done it. We have divided only our country into commands, military commands. But they've divided the CENTCOM and Pacific Command and the Northern Command, Southern Command. They, I think, also have an Arctic Command now. And they've just laid claims to the seabed of Arctic. So Look at it from sitting in Washington. You got the Arctic there, you got the Mediterranean, and you got the Red Sea. Is Arctic going to be the alternative route? While Mediterranean gets blocked out on either end or at the Baltics, or the Red Sea gets blocked at the entry point. I forget the name of the straits there, but it could happen.
Babs
Somebody,
and Mandar.
oh, yes. So, is there a statesman around, or two or three, who can solve this? Because the present lot of leadership globally, except barring one, is pretty pathetic. So
So
that's
when the powers that be, the so-called deep state, as it called, who actually run the world, control the world through the military, right? And you mentioned the 800 bases around, and they went clonked heads of people when they wanted to. They were not successful at it militarily, fair enough, even strategically in most of the cases. Today, we see that power kind of rescinding back, and one of the reasons that you enunciated these wars is because this power is resenting, coming back. They don't have the capability of striking, of holding up. For example, the Houthis, they've just done two
mm,
strikes. If it was the previous America, by now Houthis would
mm,
have been laid waste. So we see that pull back from their role of the global policeman. Um, is this the way that the world is going to be, where the Americans again become isolationists, and the deep state has realized that, listen, it's no point doing all this. Let's just handle our own business.
yeah, no, I don't think. As of now, I don't think the Americans will go back into that state. They've they've tasted blood, as it were.
Mm,
They want to be in control, still want to be in control. And Adi, it's not just the military, it's the money power, it's the dollar. If your control of America is determined by the wealth of America, where the wealthy, the powerful, wealth and power go hand in hand and they meet periodically, separately or in groups or secretly. And that's my feeling. That's how it's done. They discuss, they work out, plans for the future, and egg on the others to follow that. Institutes like the Council on Foreign Relations is an amazingly powerful institute. Whoever matters has to be a member of that, and if you're not a member of that, you're no good. And I think somebody called it Wall Street State Department. So and America has this wonderful arrangement of the revolving circle. I can be Under Secretary of State Defense today. I can be in a think tank tomorrow, and day after I can be in Lockheed Martin. Okay, so I've got the three corners covered. I become a means of maintaining continuity of policy. It may be democratic, it may be Republican. It can work on a parallel line, but between that lines they don't shift too much. So that lends them the kind of continuity in a democratic setup, which is also akin to the continuity you might have in the former Soviet Union, now Russia, or in China, in the absence of democracy. That they follow a path and they stick to it. Unlike us, we have been changing every 5 years or even less our policies, or not having policies in the 90s. So you lose time. You do an economics reform, but then it's that's not followed up adequately enough in the next 10 years. You lose time. By then, Chinese have moved in. They've got WTO and they are on the driver's seat. It's only the last few years we've begun to show some purpose, some goal, some destination, and how to get there. Uh, but we've not had this continuity, the luxury of continuity.
Hmm.
It may have been a right policy, wrong policy, extreme left, extreme right, whatever. We never had straight down the path policy. Broad principles, yes, we are peace loving, we don't want to conquer other countries, and so on and so forth. We are socialist, we are secular. That's fine. That is okay. But what is your goal in life? What
Narrative.
is you want to achieve for your country? And what is the price you're willing to pay for that? That is what makes a nation. So we're waiting for something good to happen.
You mentioned the Council of Foreign Relations, sir. That's very interesting to me because when Mr. Modi had gone to the states,
Mhm.
Mr. Jaishankar actually did a talk there in the Foreign Relations, in the Council of Foreign Relations, and he mentioned the rest was fine. He mentioned something where I found to be very curious, which he actually writes in his book as well. I'm just actually reading it. Why India Matters. Uh,
Mm.
he says that the Americans are smart enough of realizing that the world is changing today. And I'm not, of course, quoting verbatim, but he mentioned that the world is changing today, and the Americans are smart enough to adapt to the changing world by creating centers of power around the world.
Mm.
Now, that was very interesting to me because when I look at the world today, you've got the Americans sitting there, you've got the Swedes and the Finns that have come up in the north, and they're trying to kind of break down Canada so that they can,
Mm.
extend their influence into that. You've got Poland, which is becoming a power center in the new Europe, as per se, and the old Europe is pretty much dying off, with France being a outlier. Pardon me for just taking 30 seconds. You've got Israel and Saudi Arabia making that arc
Mm.
of the
Mhm.
Abrahamic Accords. You've got India and you've got Japan on the other side. These are the countries, if you see, America is most concerned about. They're very focused with their relations in these particular places. Do you see a formation of a order which, with power centers around the world, and as you said, Americans kind of trying to push across their influence through these power centers rather than do it directly, keeping their hegemony alive, but not wasting their own sense and their own resources in it?
The Americans still want a unipolar world.
Of course.
The Chinese say they want a bipolar world. They're okay for multipolarity, which is defined as bipolarity,
Hmm.
US and China. And they're okay um, with multipolarity in Asia so long as they are the supreme. I think I've got it slightly wrong here, but they want to be boss, and they're equal to China, America. They say.
G2.
G2. Barack Obama had suggested once, then he hastily backtracked when he first went to Beijing. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if if the state has realized that you know they're losing ground. Has the economic world, financial world realized that they still feel they can swing things their way?
Hmm.
Europe, you're right. There is no leader now. I mean, Germany is in a heap of trouble. The French, I don't know how to put the French. Once a power, but perhaps now limited. The United Kingdom is hanging on to the American coattails. Poland maybe, but then you have internal strife already in Poland. We are going to have a much weakened EU, and the responsibility of its weakening also lies with the United States. Why was Nord Stream 2 done?
To bring
That was,
Europe in control.
yes. You have done in your ally who is fighting for you in Ukraine, and you have hit him so that he does not get adequate supplies of energy when he needs it most. You want him to be dependent on you. So perhaps Kissinger was right. He says that it's dangerous to be America's enemy, but it's fatal to be its friend.
Yeah.
So, American decline is occurring for a number of reasons, and one is that the credibility is low,
Mm.
deliverability is poor. I mean, where have they been able to install a democracy?
Mm.
Where, I mean, and where have they been successful in eradicating a dictatorial regime? The Soviet Union collapsed under its own weight. The CIA didn't even know it is collapsing. They didn't know that on this date it'll go under, although they spent all their time studying the Soviet Union. So those things are happening in the world mostly on their own, its own momentum. You fight, we spend trillions of dollars in Afghanistan. But if you think that all those trillions of dollars went to Afghanistan, no. 75 to 90% went back home. So how do you develop a country then? If all you're interested in is first you have a, William Pfaff, that journalist, he and a politician, political analyst, had written some years ago. It's there in my book that the State Department, the government has two sections in the State Department for reconstruction. One is for destruction. One is for Pentagon is for destruction, and State Department for reconstruction. And seriously, there are a list of 26 countries there.
Ukraine is next.
Yeah, Ukraine was probably not in that list, but it's probably been added on. So it's not going to be easy for America to regain its strength if it has understood that it is losing ground. Then why is it not helping India?
Big question.
We have no ambitions to conquer America. We have no ambitions to go and live there. I mean, people go and study and live and work there and they contribute to the system. But why is it that we are becoming, we have, there's nothing to be said about how the Islamic refugees are behaving,
Hmm.
but they want to talk about religious rights in India. So what is it? Is it a bad cop, good cop routine, or is it just a fear that if these guys, nationalism is good if it's American,
Mm.
nationalism is dangerous if it is anything else.
There also, so how much of nationalism is actually good? Because when we see what is being brought about
Mm.
with the same leftist State Department, if I may, is a complete test trial in Canada of wokeism.
Mm.
I mean, what is the worst part of wokeism is done in Canada, and it's basically spread around the place. And we saw a clear example of it with the three Ivy League colleges. I wonder
Yeah.
what's the halat of the rest of them, because that it's terrible. What is the whole game of bringing that around? Because you lose more credibility. Everyone knows where the ideology is coming from. So if you want to rule the world, well, this is not the way to do
You
it.
know, that's what I said. The thing is so confusing that you don't, rationally speaking, you don't have the answer. That doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't. I don't understand why are we doing this to ourselves. I mean, you're carrying gender to absurd limits. That let a boy or a girl decide whether he's a boy or a girl. What does that mean? Huh?
I have no idea, sir.
Up, maybe I can't understand what the meaning of the whole thing is, and why is it being done? And you have this fellow sitting around in Switzerland, Klaus, क्या नाम है? Schwab,
Klaus Schwab,
uh,
World
Schwab,
Economic Forum.
and he's telling us that you'll own nothing by 2030.
2030.
Uh, what does that mean? Who will not own anything? Is this a new way of right-wing supremacy in the garb of left-wing supremacy?
Oh, okay.
Huh? It's the wealthy guys who are doing it. It's the
Yeah.
wealthy who got away with it with the big global financial crisis in 2008. They left off with fatter
Mhm.
um, sign-offs than they actually deserved. So that's where this deep state works. Preserve your own, look after your own. And democracy an item we have sold. Control the media. 90% of the American media is controlled by six companies. Then they're giving us lessons of freedom of democracy and freedom of the press. So who will take them seriously? You know, you could take them seriously because you had no choice at one time.
Yeah.
We had no alternative, but now their own creation, high technology, has given us things like this podcast. It's given us all that social media. You can say whatever you want to say up to a point, or sometimes perhaps slanted, or very often slanted rather. So you have that freedom now. You can cross question, you can ask questions more easily. पहले तो whatever New York Times or Washington Post
Yeah.
said, followed it as gospel. Hmm? BBC was, I mean, unless BBC had said it, nobody would believe it. It isn't so anymore. So your credibility is being lost there. Your credibility is being lost in the battlefield. Your dollar is weakening. So I think the West has to really smarten up a bit if you want to be in charge. And I'm not sure how the Chinese are going to take it a year from now.
Hmm. I want to come to the China question, sir, but before that, I want to ask you just another question on this aspect before we go across to China. Is that ideology doesn't make you money. At the end of it, the people who control the world, they want to make money, and
Yeah.
this leftist nonsense doesn't make you money. Uh,
No.
there's a good old saying in, and I was watching these Instagram clips. There's a ex-marine who comes out and says, we've chosen the best time in our lives to actually go in for a third world war. You think these idiots holding across these gender tags can fight?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a very interesting question. And the next question I ask is ideology doesn't make you money. And we
No,
see the BlackRocks of the world and the Vanguards and the State Streets of the world pushing back and saying the ESG scores are satanic.
I
We
mean
see an Elon Musk taking over X. So there is
the
a pushback.
money is still controlled by is in private hand. Most of it.
Yes, sir.
BlackRock, all these three you mentioned, Vanguard, BlackRock, and the third one,
State
State
Street.
Street.
State Street, sir.
80%, 90% money they control.
S&P
Huh?
500, 87%, sir.
So if you control the money, what is left to control? I mean, it may wealth, power, power, wealth. It's a circle, and that power can be different connotations to that word:
Hmm.
military power, economic power, psychologically power, information power. After all, if you have all this and you can create a suitable narrative, that's my other favorite theme all the time. That is the narrative that will get you to the end, right?
Hmm.
Or you can create white man supremacy was something that we all believed in.
Yeah.
Tarzan was there in the in darkest Africa, saving the British Empire from the nasty Germans. That was superiority in a way. The Superman of the American, Clark Kent, as good old guy who's saving America from trouble. So those are narratives of the childhood that were built for us. We always fought our little play games when we were young kids. Red Indians versus the cowboys, and the cowboys were the good guys.
Mhm.
We were told at that stage. That's how we grew up. So it takes time to understand what the game is. Superiority, do down the other guy, say your religion is on shaky ground. I am the better one. You control the media, you control the narrative. Control the narrative, you control the mind. Once you do control the mind, then you're making me say things that you want me to say, and I'm saying them on my own, telling you. Oh, that's victory. That's total victory. I'm telling you things you want me to say, and I'm saying it on my own,
Yeah.
not prompted. But I come to believe them. So this is a huge game. It is not going to be as if it's not as if the United States is going to hand over and you know go away. No, it's going to be a long, long thing. It's still a powerful country. It can still make the fanciest weaponry expensive, maybe sometimes too expensive, therefore useless. But it has the capacities, it has the means, it has huge lands to itself. It is guarded by two seas, two friendly neighbors up and down. So it is still secure. It may need to cut down on its ambitions and role and learn to be maybe first among equals with a few other countries. But to think that you can have your own guys sitting in five or six parts of the world doing your bidding, I don't think that will happen. Nobody wants to be do second fiddle because when it comes to choices, and I don't blame it, that's how it should be. My interests come before yours. You and I may have an agreement, and I am the more powerful chap. If you're in trouble, if it is in my interest to help you, I will. Otherwise, I won't. I'll find a reason. Whereas, if I'm in trouble, you had better come and help me.
Yep.
So that is how an equation between a superpower and a non-superpower is by nature going to be unequal. Democracy is only internal. Democracy is not international.
Hmm.
International is only about power and power.
That's the big games at the end of it. China is an interesting, and you mentioned it in the beginning that you built up China and you kind of let it go out of hand.
Mm.
So, one, we see China being kind of pushed into a corner today. Um, and I'm no fan of China or anything like that, but I look at it only in one aspect.
Mm.
One, can they handle China? Because China does a lot of damage to itself that nobody else does. So that's a plus point for the world. But one, can they handle China? And
Mm.
two, are they fearful of India becoming another China? And that's one of the reasons why we see the pressure put on India right now when they know we're at the precipice of
Yeah,
just breaking out.
yeah. I think China is in all sorts of trouble if you believe what is being written about it. Economically, it's either oversubscribed to many things in the infrastructure and the housing bubble and so on and so forth, and then we hear of political problems within the defense minister disappearing, and something is wrong. A lieutenant general or two were also sacked, I believe.
Yes, sir.
So
So
that is
53 in the past year, sir.
that is the Chinese way of controlling their system.
Mm.
Jinping wants to be the man who brought China to a level to be equal to America, if not more. But the problem is, have we read China correctly or not? Is China so far gone that it can't recover? Secondly, you're quite right. The Americans have, the West has realized, although they haven't stopped dealing, that giving China the chance to grow economically and pretend that this would help China become, the narrative was that this would make China democratic and peaceful and friendly. I think that was narrative only to convince ourselves that we have given ourselves a noble reason to help China. Actually, we are helping our own economies by keeping the inflation down, by using coolie labor from that country, the cyber coolies and everybody else from that country. They made the same thing to our specification and sold it to the world, gave it back to us, or sold it for us. Now, having done that, you can't retract because the Chinese hold their money and there's lots of complications about breaking loose. They don't want to repeat that in India. That's my impression. They will talk very nicely. They will politically they will be very nice and courteous and everything. Say all the good things. All the private sector, all the public, all private assessments that we hear from American Western agencies are all positive. Even IMF and World Bank are saying
Mm.
positive forecasts about us. But the problem is that we're a democracy which does not seem to agree with their democracy. That is the problem. They want a pliable democracy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah, sit down now, keep sitting. So that is what is not going to happen. And that is the problem. The problem is not so much economic growth.
Mm.
What they think friendly growth, which we allow them to run
Compliance.
pliable, how pure. But we're not going to do that. We want to the growth do things ourselves. We want to make our things our own. We want to send the satellite to the moon. I mean, those are danger signs.
Mm.
There are dangerous signs that these chaps are doing it on their own without my help, and they're doing it cheaper. They sold COVID vaccine much cheaper to many countries in Africa, or gave them free. So those are danger signals. Those are not. Those are. You say nice things in 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 um, in public fora. You can't say anything else. But how many American newspapers have lauded India's effort during COVID? How many have said anything decent about Chandrayaan? Those are for us. Those are signs of uh, are coming up,
Yeah,
that we are maturing into a state that matters. We have France and United Kingdom members of the UNSC, and you want to leave the fifth largest economy out of reckoning. We'll be third soon. What kind of arrangement? What kind of new world order are you bringing back? That we will have इधर पोलैंड को बिठा देंगे, उधर जापान को बिठा देंगे, इधर इंडिया को बिठा देंगे. India doesn't want it. We don't want to be base stations for your interest. What's in my interest? I will henceforth have a policy which is my interest. If you can guarantee that you will provide me support if China attacks, and then you will give me support, yeah, maybe. But will you? So those are things that for us now, I think it is a little too premature to talk about these kinds of things officially.
mm,
But we have to keep that in mind for the future. It's best to play low key.
quiet.
Domestically, it's okay, but not externally.
I think I agree with Deng Xiaoping when he said hide your strength, bide your time. And that's, I think, very apt.
Uh,
Uh, just do what you need to do. In that aspect of it, sir, coming towards India, one of the biggest things I look at in the Indian foreign policy today and the Indian interaction with the world is that we always try and create a leverage. I call this hedging your bets. I mean, uh,
mhm.
we saw this with the oil. We see this with uh, fighter aircraft engines. We see this everywhere. We're trying to create a leverage. तू
Mm.
नहीं तो कोई और सही, तू नहीं तो कोई और सही sort of a
Yeah.
game. Do you think that's the key of a lot of the frustration that comes out from the West? That these guys, when we put pressure, it doesn't matter to them.
Yeah.
We are brushing it off.
But,
What's the
but
game with this one leverage thing, and how do you think they are going to react?
because I think they've been considering thinking of us as a colony for too long. Huh? Even after independence, we'll handle them. They're not going anywhere. They don't want to do anything much. So we'll handle them. But this business that I will have an alternative to what you're offering. I will buy the Rafale and I will not buy the F-18 or whatever. Huh? That I will go to company X for. I will buy oil from America, from Russia. You can't stop me. I'll buy it with Indian rupees. So those are leverages that we are learning to use, and I think it's a damn good idea that we must have alternatives. There should be no dead ends.
Hmm.
या फंस गए तो अब यही करना पड़ेगा. So because it has happened in the past that they've come and said, look at the amount of sanctions they put on us, cryogenic, nuclear sanctions, nuclear suppliers group. But we did it. We did it our way. We did it slowly. It took us time, but we did it. You're doing this to a country which is potentially going to be a great friend of yours. We don't want to be communists. We don't want to live that life. We don't want to be under a religious dictatorship of any kind. So we could have been one of the best friends, but no. First, you sign on the dotted line and say, I shall be your humble slave. I'm exaggerating a bit, but that's
Yeah, I
what I do.
mean,
So we can't do that anymore in life. I have my people, my Indian friends, they also have aspirations. They also want to be what you and I are. If that is even a modest kind, not where the American is, they want to be where we are. The crores of Indians who want to be like that, and they have the abilities. So imagine if all of us had the same GDP per head as the Americans. What does it mean? Where do we get those resources from? Where do we get the markets from? Markets भी यही हैं, इनके पास तो market भी नहीं रहेगा.
correct.
Their population is equal to our electorate in numbers, or maybe less,
Less.
far less actually. So where do we go? What will they do? So it's going to be a long haul. It's not going to be easy. We need 10, 15 years of steady, determined growth, single minded. अभी तो 10 ही साल हुए हैं, थोड़ा और टाइम लगेगा.
Hmm. And the funny thing is, sir, we also, it's not just these guys. We have a neighborhood which is interesting. You've got, I don't like to call countries small, sir. It's a terrible way of referring to them because
Yeah,
Maldives has got a single vote in the UN, so do we. It's the same thing.
yeah,
Um, but we got these countries around us who are instigated either by the Americans or either by the Chinese.
yeah,
And
or by
somewhere,
both,
sorry, sir,
or by both.
or by both. I was going to just say that somewhere I find the Americans and the Chinese putting away their differences and saying, "Yaar, isko pakadte hain. Pehle rest we'll fight later. Let's get this
Yeah,
guy first."
yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you remember in 1971 when we were getting organized for, it was coming, the war was coming, and the Americans were very keen that Nixon should go to Beijing to meet
Hmm.
Mao, and Kissinger used to meet Huang Hua, foreign minister, quite often, and they met once somewhere, and uh, Kissinger sort of hinted to the Chinese that if you made the northern borders a little more lively, we won't mind. Okay, he's supporting a dictatorship which is creating havoc in our neighborhood and taking the support of another dictator to do down a democracy. So value judgment क्या है? Nil. So that's the lessons. Those are the lessons we have to learn and imbibe in ourselves. That this is how the real world is. It's all about myself, me, myself. So God should bless America. Devil can take the rest.
So, what do you think about our plan with regards to basically the Indo-Pacific? We see ourselves in a very interesting place today. We've got the Quad on one arm. Uh, we they've tried to kind of make us into a military sort of a thing. It didn't happen. We've got the IMEC on the other side, supported by the I2U2. We refuse to get into any military sort of a this thing, but these are security trade corridors at the end of it. And we seem to be flying our own flag. They wanted us to be a part of this coalition in the Red Sea. We said no. As a matter of fact, more of the action in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea has been done by the Indian Navy rather than this so-called coalition.
Yeah.
The Americans are not with the Philippines when the Chinese are hounding them over that Scarborough show. It's our Navy who went there for an exercise which rattled the Chinese, as a matter of fact.
Mm.
What do you think about these kind of plays by us? Of course, we are not ready for a permanent deployment and stuff like that, but it's always also a show of force, right? How do you categorize these plays?
I, I, by, I feel that these kinds of alliances are not for us.
So,
We have our primary interest is the Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea. If we extend ourselves to the Pacific, then we are stretching ourselves. That's my impression. We must be able to safeguard these routes first, and the Malacca Straits.
hmm
At least from the Malacca Straits to Aden, we should be our beat. Maybe if somebody like France wants to join in, they have considerable presence
yeah,
in the Indian Ocean. But otherwise, it should Indian Ocean should remain Indian, and the other two countries, the other the Bay and the Arabian Sea should be patrolled by us. And Pacific, what is our? I have not really understood. What is our interest in the Western Pacific?
nothing.
I mean, okay, let's say even take Vietnam or Philippines or Indonesia. What is our interest there that we would want to be an active participant in the naval adventures of the Quad? I can't see any. Now, if the Japanese were to build their own navy and be seafaring to a great extent, that would help.
Hmm.
That would help Quad. That would help us. So, but मेरा नहीं मेरे तो लगता है कि I think it's we should just fly our flag. But I also feel, Adi, that these two or three incidents have happened. We should be careful not to get drawn into the battle,
Hmm.
where it becomes an, an engagement between our navy and somebody else's navy, Iranian navy or Yemeni navy, such as they may be. So we have to we have to be careful about these kinds of things. I mean, rescuing is great, and we should, but these are then isolated. They should remain as isolated in a sense, not as a result of Indian Navy patrolling the Arabian Sea from the Red Sea onwards.
Hmm.
फिर वो आपका रोज का मर जाएगा. There will be setbacks also, inevitably.
Inevitably.
वो तो accident तो होता है. Somebody will get one bomb through then.
Hmm.
So those are things that we have to bear in mind while we deal with these things. Let's not be too adventurous.
Absolutely. That's why I said so. There's still time for us. I mean, if you're wanting to go that path, I think there's a long way to go.
Mm.
Uh, my last question to you, sir, to close this. I mean, I could talk to you all day long. It's such an engaging conversation. But uh, what would be the three things that you would recommend to uh, the foreign policy establishment going forward, looking at the as you said, the confusion in the world order today? Because if you see the conversations happening from the external affairs minister here and every other external affairs minister or foreign minister or secretary of state or however you want to term it, they talk about the new world order. They talk about the change in setup and this and that and everything. And we have done certain things. We've got the global south.
Mm.
uh, we've not called ourselves the leader. We've positioned ourselves very, very rightly.
Mhm.
What would be your recommendations to the establishment today, that these are the things that we should kind of try and communicate as the Bharatiya narrative, as they put it across, sir?
Ah, I've never thought of it like this. Look, the first thing you have to tell everybody is that the narrative is Bharatiya, whatever you want, Bharatiya narrative, but it's not anti anyone.
Mm,
Okay, just because I'm Bharatiya, I'm not anti America or anti France or anti or even anti China. I am looking after my national
so,
interest. That message has to go home. Secondly, I want to be your friend. I will trade with you, but I will also trade on my terms in the sense that I will also manufacture and
yep.
produce, sell. I will invite you to participate in the Indian growth venture. I will make things easier for you. But रहेगा सब कुछ Indian. So, I mean, for foreign collaboration, those are all those necessary arrangements you have to make. But we will do it. We can do it together. Thirdly, I think we have to send a message that while we grow, we will also grow stronger militarily and security wise. We will not make the previous mistakes of not ignoring these aspects of growth, because it is a world where things can go wrong very fast, very easily.
Mm,
So you have to keep that in mind. And they should know that these steps are not passovers. That's it. I can't think of. बाकी तो बड़े बड़े पॉलिसी मेकर्स हैं ना, बदल कर लेंगे.
no, so but what you said is very, very interesting. Be a part of the growth story, and जो
या
भी होगा इंडिया में होगा, बाकी सब
ना
कुछ
कि तो
ठीक है.
करना है जो करो, यहाँ आके नहीं कर सकते आप.
It's interesting that we have, as a country, come to a point where we can say, "Jo karna hai, kar le yaar. This is what we want."
Yeah.
And I think that is a big, big step in the growth story of India. People
But
don't
play
realize it.
my thing is play that card softly.
Softly, yes, yes. It has to
Don't
be done behind closed doors. It has to be done
don't,
quietly.
don't do chest thumping. The
Yeah,
message should reach the place it should reach. That's all.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think our game with China is one of the most pristine examples of quiet,
Yeah,
hardline diplomacy.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, I wonder why people call it a very soft-lined approach, but because I think the Chinese are
Because
quite miffed.
वो बॉलीवुड मूवीज देख देख के ना वही आदत पड़ गई है कि
The Chinese are pretty miffed at the way we respond to them. So because they get very pissed off that यार
या या
हमको बोलते रहते हैं, they don't even respond to us. What is wrong with these people? And we respond at our own sweet time, in our own place, in our own way. They get very frustrated with this, and I think this is what you just said is absolutely immaculate with regards to that. So it's an honor talking to you. Trust you me, I've had such a lovely time on this Sunday afternoon. Uh, that's when the show is recorded and will be put out in a day or two. And of course, I would be honored for another opportunity sometime in the future to peck at your brain and get something more out of us so that we can all learn. Till then, sir, thank you so much. And
Thank
Jai
you.
Hind.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure. We can meet again.
Thank you.
Take care.